Okay, vielen Dank für diese Einladung. So. Ja. Es, ich, ich danke Ihnen für diese Einladung. Und ich denke, dass junge und wissenschaftliche Personal, die müssen zusammenarbeiten in dieser, in dieser Richtung. Und es freut mich sehr, hier zu sein. Sie sind nicht viel, aber sie sind sehr motiviert und es freut mich. Ich gehe Ihnen lesen einen Text, das ist ein Stück von einer Keynote für den UNESCO, das ich habe getan im November. Und das geht über die Fragile City. Es ist in Englisch, Entschuldigung. The current crisis that we are going through makes us discover our cities are much more fragile than we think. The core district of city accumulate vacant space. You can see it. Shop and vacant space and shop, they are increasingly rapidly. Accommodation and flat are too cramped and public space are too tight. While facing those concerns, we witness a real estate movement towards suburbanity due to the understanding of space as a luxury good. The importance of accessible open space for physical and mental health was recently highlighted once again by the COVID-19 pandemic and is among the reasons for the building boom in peri-urban regions all around Europe. The fallacy propagates itself even more since cities, with their high density, the tight and sometimes narrow historical fabric, as well as the enormous real estate price, do offer less space and are in this narrative less attractive than the peri-urban realm. Conversely, this discussion is far from being recent. During the second half of the 19th century, high density in industrialized cities were argued to be one of the major causes of fire, social disorder, and disease. As a result, planning controls were developed that specified a maximum of allowed densities. As a consequence, among others, those regulations, urban planning in the 60s experienced an awakening of discussion concerning the resulting issue of urban sprawl and its negative effect on the liveliness of cities, on transportation, and on environment. Our discussion is not new at all. We know it, which was occurred since the implementation of those planning controls. It was not until Jane Jacobs, who convincingly argued for the prior so negatively connoted density, that subsequently the planning theory and practice came to recognize the importance of density and diversity. Jacob displayed what can be taken as common knowledge nowadays, that density enables and activates those so vital elements of diversity, proximity as a goal for a desirable city. Explicitly, the notion of proximity allowed to launch a different urban fabric and life, the so-called 15 minutes city, a concept of chrono-urbanism built on hyper-proximity that allows accessibility for everyone at all times. The city concept offers dwellers to accept their essential living needs in less than 15 minutes and urge the transformation of urban space. Besides being the catalyst for proximity, density is also essential for the mutualization of resource, which goes hand in hand with the objective of a frugal and sustainable usage of resource. We argue that this mutualization of resource should be at the forefront of our practical and theoretical approach, implying that the question of the necessity of density is obsolete, since it is and should be a given. Rather than questioning the density and then the quantity of space, the crucial interrogation should be the quality of space which we have in our city. In all honesty, we must acknowledge that the density indicators are nowadays merely instruments used within negotiation case between private and public actors, and rather less and less tools of spatial design than real estate negotiation ustensiles. Summing it up, it would be more than regrettable if we repeat the same discussion about density which has been led, interrogated, and unraveled a century ago. Instead, we should take what we have learned forward, especially since the pressing fight against climate change won't allow us to waste this crucial time. One could anticipate the assumption that the weakness of our cities nowadays stems from the blind-sided way of dealing mostly with the quantity rather than the quality of space. By understanding the importance of the quality of space, we argue that the discussion of the quality of space has to be steered eagerly in both directions, the social as well as the ecological, especially in view of extreme climatic conditions and social upheavals. Bruno Latour, in his book Où atterrir, links those challenges to each other. We argue that the crisis linked to climate change only increase social inequalities by creating different planets for the haves and the have-nots. To face those challenges, the discipline of urbanism must become deeply rooted in its environment, considering its ecology system, water, vegetation, without being limited to an ecological response or being opposed to a social response. Very often, economy is opposed to ecology. The demand of development to those of nature, question of social injustice to the prosperity of the living world. We agree and argue that exactly this might be a reason why our city became so fragile over the past decades. Therefore, a profound reorientation in practice and theory must come at stake. Within this context, the metaphorical comparison of Mohsen Mostafi from the city to a SUV is quite appropriate. He questioned if it's enough to just design the SUV to be hybrid car through purely technocratic problem solving, or if we should rather view the fragility of our planet and its resource as an opportunity for speculative design innovation in order to go beyond it and adapt the inherent conflictual condition between ecology and urbanism. Rethinking the concept of our construction, design, and investment habits might be a good point to start. I will skip this because you are freezing. I think I will conclude and say that I think the climate crisis is as well as the social inequalities seen across the globe. They don't just in front of the city or country border. And if we understand the importance of a more territorial approach, as Latour explained, I think then if we overcome the question, as I explained, of quantity rather than the quality of space, we have the possibility to change our fragile city into ecologically and humanly vivid space. So, Let's see the current crisis as a chance to link the territorial and the spatial justice with ecology to tackle both the climate as well as our social and urban crisis. Please.